That morning, I stood in my own living room staring at the torn pieces of first-class tickets to Paris scattered across the floor. The trip my daughter-in-law had called a little piece of heaven for my wife had begun with a phone call at dawn. "Kenneth, are you home? They're moving your things out?" I used to think the cruelest part was being replaced on the anniversary trip, the one meant to celebrate my wife's recovery after her illness. I was wrong. What was really being replaced was my ownership of this very house. Before I tell you what happened inside these walls, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me where you're listening from. Now, let me go back to that morning. The morning I began to understand that the so-called gift was never as simple as I thought. I didn't pick up the torn tickets right away. I stood there for a long time, staring at them, as if they might piece themselves back together and tell me where I had gone wrong. 3 weeks earlier, Emily had walked into my house holding a pale yellow envelope. She hugged Michelle for a long time, long enough that my wife looked a little uncomfortable. Nicholas stood behind her, hands in his pockets, eyes avoiding mine. Emily said it was a gift, a celebration. Michelle had just come through a serious illness. 10 days in France and Italy. First-class flights, 5-star hotels, private tours, all inclusive. "She said it like she was handing us a slice of heaven," Michelle cried. Not because of Paris or Florence. She just whispered that it had been many years since she'd seen blue water stretching to the horizon. I remember that clearly, and I remember thanking my daughter-in-law. For the first time, thinking maybe I had misjudged her. I've never been a man who trusts easily. 40 years as an engineer, I trusted blueprints and numbers more than promises. But that day, I let my guard down. I thought maybe family eventually finds its balance. Departure day came faster than I expected. I woke at 4 in the morning, made coffee, checked Michelle's passport, her medication, her follow-up appointment after we got back. I wasn't going on that trip. Emily had booked a room for 2 women who needed rest. I told myself I could accept that. Michelle needed peace. I still had small things to handle at home. But when I carried the suitcase to the door, Nicholas showed up alone. I knew something was wrong the second I saw his face. No Emily, no airport car, just my son standing on the porch before sunrise. He said there had been a small change. Emily had decided to bring her own mother instead of me. Her mother was depressed, needed fresh air. "Mom understands." "Right," Nicholas said, like he was asking permission from a stranger. Michelle stood behind me. I could feel her confusion without turning around. She didn't ask many questions. She just nodded. I could have objected. I could have asked to see the reservation, but I saw how tired Michelle still was. Months in and out of the hospital. It takes something from you. I didn't want to start an argument on the morning she was supposed to leave, so I told Nicholas. As long as Michelle was cared for, that was enough. He said of course too quickly. The car pulled away just as the sun began to rise. I stood on the porch, holding a cup of cold coffee. I told myself I was overthinking. A trip is still a trip. Family shouldn't measure every little detail. The first 2 days, Michelle sent a few messages. A photo of her in a square in Paris. A small pastry on a table. She wrote that everything was fine. Just that. Not as many words as I expected. On the second night, I called her. The call was short, a little broken up. Emily said they were taking a high-speed train to Italy. I heard noise in the background, suitcases rolling, someone sighing. Michelle told me not to worry. I hung up and sat in the living room for a long time. That's when I began replaying the small details I had ignored. Emily offering to hold on to some of Michelle's documents for travel insurance. Her careful questions about our home ownership when we refinanced a few years back. Nicholas talking lately about long-term financial solutions. I didn't like the feeling of pieces moving without my permission. On the 3rd morning, Margaret called. Her voice wasn't her usual curious neighbor tone. It was steady, clear. "Kenneth, are you home? There's a moving truck in front of your house. They're carrying things out of your garage." I looked around the quiet living room. Nothing seemed disturbed. I told her she might have the wrong house. She was silent for a few seconds. Then she said, "I don't. Emily is here." I didn't answer right away. I set the phone down, walked out the back door, took the narrow side path that leads to the secondary road. From there, I could see the front of my house without being noticed. A white truck was parked along the curb. The garage door was open. Two men were carrying boxes out, and Emily stood there, holding a clipboard, speaking to someone on the phone. That was when I understood why the tickets were torn on my floor that morning. I hadn't ripped them because I was left off the trip. I ripped them because I finally saw what I didn't want to believe. The vacation was never a gift. It was an empty space. And that space was wide enough for someone else to step into my house without me being there. I didn't step out right away. I stayed behind the low hedges along the side path, watching my own house like it belonged to someone else. The garage door was wide open, boxes neatly labeled. I saw the wooden chair Michelle sits in every afternoon, wrapped in plastic. Emily was on the phone, calm, composed, not the face of someone doing anything wrong. I went back to my car, sat there a few minutes. If I stormed in, it would turn into an argument. I needed to understand before I said a word. I called Margaret again. She told me a man in a shirt with a real estate company logo had been walking around the yard since early morning, taking photos, measuring, writing notes. I heard Emily say something about the listing goes live this week, Margaret whispered. I thanked her. Then I did what 40 years of engineering taught me to do. Check the data. Before reacting, I opened my phone, pulled up the local property listings. It took less than 2 minutes. My house was already for sale. New photos, new description. Owners ready to relocate. Rare investment opportunity. Motivated sale. The asking price was at least 10% below market value. My name wasn't listed as the contact. Emily's was. I don't remember signing anything that allowed that. I walked through the front door like I always do. The two movers stopped when they saw me. Emily turned around. Surprise flickered across her face for half a second, then disappeared. "Dad, you're home early?" she asked. I told her I had never left. She gave a soft laugh. Said she was just preparing ahead for the future. That Michelle and I had talked before about downsizing. That the market timing was good. I asked who signed the listing agreement. Emily said Michelle had signed a temporary power of attorney, allowing her to handle a few matters during the trip. Power of attorney. I asked to see a copy. She hesitated. Just for a moment, then she opened her folder and handed me the papers. I recognized Michelle's signature at the bottom, slightly shaky, but hers. The title at the top did not say travel insurance. It said durable power of attorney. The scope included authority over assets, authority to sign sales contracts, authority to represent in real estate transactions. Signed 1 week before the trip. I looked at Emily. She said Michelle agreed because she was still weak after her illness, that her daughter-in-law was simply helping. Nicholas had appeared by then. He said it was temporary, a way to reduce stress. I asked whether Michelle had independent legal advice before signing. No one answered directly. I folded the papers. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said everything stops, immediately, until I speak to Michelle myself. Emily said canceling the listing would damage credibility. I told her credibility wasn't the most urgent concern right now. They left soon after. The garage was a mess. The air felt heavy. I went into my study and pulled out the deed. The property is jointly owned. Michelle and I together. Any legal sale requires proper consent. That power of attorney might allow Emily to represent Michelle, but it does not replace my signature, unless they intended to pressure me into signing the rest. I called Michelle. This time there was no travel noise, just silence for a few long seconds before she answered. I asked if she remembered signing anything before the trip. She said Emily brought a stack of papers, explained they were insurance forms and tour confirmations. Michelle signed because she trusted her. She didn't read carefully. She said she was tired that day. I asked if she received a copy. She said no. I could hear the confusion in her voice, and I knew she had no idea the house was listed for sale. I didn't tell her everything over the phone. I just told her to keep all personal documents with her. Passport, bank cards, everything. Sign nothing else. Hand nothing to anyone. She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked if something was wrong. I told her I was just checking a few small details. After the call, I sat alone in the living room. This house is not just an asset. It's where Michelle planted flowers for 20 years. It's where Nicholas grew up. And now, it was described as an investment opportunity. I refreshed the listing page. The view count was climbing. I started thinking about motive. Emily works in real estate. Recently, I'd heard Nicholas mention a business venture that wasn't going well. Loans, commitments. I began to see the connection. Quick sale, lower price, early cash. Move us into a cheaper long-term care facility, like they'd hinted before. Less burden for you, Dad, Nicholas had said. Not to protect us, but to unlock equity. I called an old friend, a real estate attorney. I didn't tell a long story. I just asked, if someone signs a power of attorney while still recovering from illness, without independent counsel, and under misunderstanding, can that document be challenged? He said there are many factors. But if there's evidence of misrepresentation or abuse of trust, invalidating it is not impossible. I looked out the window. Charleston was as humid as ever. Neighbors going about their day. Everything appearing normal. Only the foundation of my family was being hollowed out from inside. And I knew, if I didn't act carefully and at the right time, this house would change hands before Michelle ever had the chance to stand in her garden one more time. I didn't sleep that night, not out of fear, but because I understood that one reckless move could push everything out of control. I spent my whole life fixing systems that were designed wrong, and when a structure starts to crack, you don't smash it down. You find the load-bearing point. The next morning, I met with my attorney friend. He read the copy of the power of attorney I had photographed. He didn't rush to conclusions. He asked simple questions. Was Michelle fully informed? Was there an independent witness? Any written communication? Recordings? Anything showing the true purpose? I thought of Margaret. I drove back to the neighborhood and stopped by her house. Margaret isn't the type to interfere out of curiosity, but she's had a security camera facing the street for years. I asked if she had footage from the day Emily brought papers for Michelle to sign. Margaret looked at me for a few seconds, then nodded. The camera couldn't capture the words on the documents, but it captured something else. In the video, Emily handed Michelle the folder at the patio table. Michelle wore her reading glasses. Emily pointed to a few spots, flipped pages quickly. The entire process lasted less than 3 minutes. 3 minutes for a document granting authority over a lifetime of assets. Margaret also said she overheard Emily say, "It's just travel insurance." I asked her to save the footage. When I left her house, one thing was clear. Emily had chosen her timing carefully. Michelle had just recovered. She was still weak. She trusted her daughter-in-law. She was preparing for a dream trip. And I was not present. But even a careful plan has weak points. I reviewed my bank and credit card statements. The deposit for the travel company had been charged to my credit card, a high-limit card I reserved for major expenses. I didn't remember handing it over. But I remembered something else. A few weeks earlier, Emily said she needed the number to confirm an upgraded room. I read the card number to her over the phone. The payment wasn't fully processed yet. Part of the Florence hotel charge would go through at check-in. I didn't cancel the trip. I didn't call Emily to accuse her either. If I did, they would adjust their plan immediately, speed up the sale, pressure me to sign. I needed timing. I called the credit card company and reported that my card had been used for transactions I did not personally authorize in full. I didn't demand an immediate cancellation. I asked them to flag the account, prepare to freeze it upon my confirmation. Then my attorney and I drafted a formal revocation of the power of attorney. Grounds included misrepresentation and conflict of interest. The document would take effect once legally delivered. We sent a copy to the brokerage office, listing the house, requesting an immediate suspension of the sale, pending verification of the remaining co-owner's consent. That co-owner is me. I didn't shout. I didn't make a scene in the neighborhood. I simply placed each brick back where it belonged. That evening, Michelle texted. They had arrived in Florence. She said the hotel was beautiful, but between her short lines, I could read the fatigue. I asked if she was keeping her phone with her. She said yes. I told her if anything made her uncomfortable, call me. Anytime. Even in the middle of the night. I didn't tell her I was preparing to freeze every financial channel connected to that trip. The next morning I received an email from the brokerage. The listing had been temporarily removed due to internal legal concerns. Less than an hour later, Nicholas called. His voice wasn't gentle anymore. He asked why the listing was pulled, said I was ruining a good opportunity for the whole family. I asked him if he truly understood what that power of attorney granted. He was silent for a few seconds. Then he said it was just paperwork. I didn't argue. I simply said any paperwork involving this house requires my consent, and at this moment, I do not consent. The call ended in a heavy silence. I looked at the clock. According to their itinerary that afternoon, they would check in at the hotel in Florence. The remaining balance would automatically charge to my card. I called the bank. I confirmed the freeze on the credit card, reported the earlier transaction as insufficiently authorized, provided copies of the revocation and notice of the suspended listing. The bank representative told me all pending charges would be declined. I set the phone down, slowly, not out of revenge, but to stop a flawed structure from continuing to rise on my foundation. I knew when they reached the reception desk in Florence. The first thing to be declined would not only be the card, it would be the assumption that they could use my life's work, as if I no longer existed. I didn't have to wait long. Around 3 in the afternoon Charleston time, my phone vibrated. Nicholas's name lit up the screen. I looked at it for a few seconds before answering. His voice had lost its usual calm. The card had been declined. The hotel said the reservation wasn't fully paid. They asked for another method. Emily tried twice. Both attempts were rejected. I could hear noise behind him. Fast voices. Suitcases rolling across stone floors. Someone breathing hard. Nicholas asked me what I had done. I told him I was protecting my assets from unclear transactions. He said I had put them in an embarrassing position. I'm not concerned about embarrassment. I'm concerned that my house was listed for sale while I was still living in it. He went quiet for a few seconds. Then he said it was only a long-term plan, that they intended to move us into a more suitable retirement community, somewhere with full medical services. I asked who gave them permission to decide when that would happen. There was no clear answer. The call ended abruptly. 10 minutes later, Emily called. Her tone was different now. No more carefully measured softness. She said I was ruining a trip I had agreed to. She mentioned Michelle's health, said this stress could affect her. I told her Michelle had no idea the house was listed. There was silence on the line. I added that the power of attorney had been legally revoked. The brokerage had been notified. Any transaction involving my property would be examined closely. Emily asked what proof I had of misrepresentation. I told her there was video of the signing process and of the incomplete explanation. This time she didn't deny it immediately. Instead, she suggested we sit down and talk when everyone gets back. I said we didn't need to wait. I asked to speak to Michelle directly. After a moment, my wife's voice came on. Small, slightly trembling. She asked what was happening. I didn't circle around it. I told her our house had been listed under Emily's name, based on the power of attorney she signed before the trip. On the other end, I heard a faint, uneven breath. Michelle said she had no idea. She believed it was only travel insurance and permission to handle small matters in case of emergency. I told her everything had been paused, and I wanted her to leave that group immediately. Emily cut in saying I was complicating things unnecessarily. I told them I had contacted an old colleague in Italy. We worked together on an engineering project years ago. He now lives near Florence. He was ready to help Michelle move to another hotel. Safe. Independent. I could hear the shift in the air. Nicholas asked if I was trying to divide the family. I told him family is not divided by truth. Family breaks when truth is hidden. The call ended in heavy silence. That evening, Michelle texted. She had left the original hotel. My friend met her in the lobby. No shouting, no scene, just a quiet departure. Emily and Nicholas stayed behind. I don't know how they managed that night, but the next morning, Nicholas called again. No anger this time, just exhaustion. He said they had moved to a smaller hotel near the airport. They had no available payment method left. He said I had taken things too far. I asked him whether listing our home for sale while we were away was not already too far. He said they were trying to relieve immediate financial pressure, that Emily's project was struggling, that after selling the house they planned to reinvest and take better care of us. I listened. I didn't interrupt. Then I told him something I had prepared in advance. The trust fund I had planned to leave to Nicholas, established years ago as part of our family's financial plan, had been revised. I had signed documents transferring its full value to a local charity that supports elderly victims of financial exploitation. On the other end, There was a long silence. Nicholas asked if I was joking. I told him I do not joke about decisions that involve trust. I didn't say my son no longer existed to me. I simply said the man I once trusted to inherit what I built had chosen a different path, and I cannot rest my future on that choice. The call ended without goodbye. That night, Michelle called from her new room in Florence. Her voice was steadier. She said she felt like she had just woken from a long sleep. She truly believed everything had been for our benefit. I told her our greatest mistake was not trusting people. It was trusting. Without verifying, we talked longer than usual. Outside my window, Charleston was quiet. But I knew that across the ocean, another structure was collapsing. Not because I wanted it to, but because it had been built on dishonesty. And when that foundation is removed, everything above it finds its true place. After that night, nothing ended immediately. Nicholas and Emily returned to Charleston earlier than planned. No more photos of plazas. No elegant dinners. No proud captions. They came back quietly. I didn't go to the airport. Michelle returned 2 days later with my friend. When I saw her step through the gate pulling her small suitcase, I realized I had been holding my breath for days. We didn't talk much on the drive home. Just simple questions. Was the flight all right? Are you tired? But between those questions, something had shifted. That evening, Michelle sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she had signed those papers. She placed her hand on the wood and said I didn't read carefully. I told her the responsibility wasn't only about reading or not reading. It was about the person who chose to explain it dishonestly. The days that followed were quiet and legal. My attorney sent formal notice revoking the power of attorney. The brokerage confirmed cancellation of the listing agreement. A financial review ensured no transactions were left pending. Emily did not come to the house again. Nicholas called once. He suggested we sit down and talk like a family. I agreed to meet. Not to argue, just to listen. We met at a small cafe downtown. Nicholas looked older than he had just weeks before. He said financial pressure pushed them to believe selling the house was the most reasonable solution. He said they planned to move us into a quality care facility and invest the rest to stabilize things. I asked why they didn't speak to us directly. He had no answer. I told my son what hurt wasn't the money. It was being removed from decisions about my own life. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't declare any dramatic break. I simply said from now on boundaries would be clear. No more signing on our behalf. No more decisions made for us. Nicholas nodded. But some distances cannot be shortened by promises. A week later, Michelle and I sat together in the living room. The house was secure, but the old sense of safety wasn't fully intact. Michelle said she didn't want to live under quiet suspicion. Every time she looked around, she remembered how close this home had come to being handed away without her knowing. I asked her what she wanted. She said she still wanted to see the ocean, not on a postcard, not in someone else's photos. So we began discussing something that had once been only a passing thought, selling the house, but on our terms, not because we were pushed, because we chose to. We worked with a different agent, transparent, independent counsel. The price reflected true market value. The transfer was handled with preparation and control. When we signed the contract, I looked at Michelle. This time she read every page slowly. So did I. We didn't move into a retirement facility. We bought a luxury RV, comfortable, safe, flexible enough to stop wherever we wished. The day it rolled out of Charleston, I looked back at the street we had lived on for nearly 30 years. I expected regret. Instead, I felt light. Nicholas and Emily stood at a distance. They didn't step closer. I didn't ask them to. Our relationship isn't what it once was, but it isn't destroyed. It has simply been placed where it belongs now, with clear boundaries. We drove south, first toward the coastline, where the air turns saltier and the horizon opens wide. Michelle sat beside me, window slightly open. The wind moved through hair that had grown thinner after long months of illness. She said she wasn't afraid anymore. I understood that feeling. Some losses can't be avoided. Some trust never returns in the same shape. But we still have the right to decide our own lives. I once believed my greatest asset was that house, or that trust fund. Now I know it's the ability to stand steady when everything around you shakes. Family is not guaranteed by blood. It's built on respect and honesty. The RV kept moving down the highway. Ahead of us was open road. No hidden contracts. No decisions made behind our backs. Just Michelle and me. Two people who have lived long enough to understand that freedom isn't a gift someone hands you. It's something you protect every day with clarity and self-respect. And this time, no one signs for us. If my story makes you think about trust, about boundaries, about protecting what you've spent a lifetime building, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, press like, and share this video with someone you care about. We can't choose how others behave, but we can choose how we respond. With clarity, with dignity, and with kindness that isn't blind. Family is more than blood. It's responsibility, transparency, respect, even when money and interest enter the room. Thank you for listening to my story all the way to the end. I value every one of you who stayed.